Fiancée wanted to explore feelings for her longtime crush, so I put her right where she belongs. Alright, here's how it all started, and trust me, this isn't something I expected to be dealing with at 22, especially after 3 years with someone I thought I'd marry. My fiancée, 21F, and I had been together since we were practically kids, growing up together through all those firsts and milestones. We got engaged just last year, and honestly, I thought we were solid. I mean, we weren't perfect. Who is? But I thought we had the type of relationship where we were always honest with each other. Or at least I was. So it all kicked off in November. Things had been a bit off lately, but I brushed it off as stress from work, life, and all that. But then I noticed she'd been talking to this guy. I'll call him Matt. Not his real name, but close enough. I knew a bit about him from her past. He was someone she'd liked way back before we got together. I'd even met him once at a friend's gathering and didn't think twice about it. I mean, yeah, maybe I was a little uncomfortable with the idea of her talking to an old crush, but I'm not the jealous guy type, so I shrugged it off. At first it seemed harmless. She'd show me her phone every now and then and mention something funny he said or whatever. It was like, okay, cool, he's just an old friend. But things started changing, and I felt like I was on the outside looking in. She'd go out of her way to mention him, to bring him up in conversations where it didn't even fit, you know? Like, we'd be talking about our plans for Halloween, and she'd slip in a random comment about how Matt likes Halloween too, isn't that funny? Anyway, the weirdness escalated. I noticed she'd be on her phone a lot more, especially when we were together, which wasn't like her. Normally, she was the type who'd leave her phone somewhere in the other room, not constantly attached to it. But now, she was glued to it, texting nonstop. And whenever I asked who she was talking to, she'd get a little defensive, saying it was just friends. Which, okay, maybe it was, but something about her tone was different. One night, she came up to me all excited like, "Hey, let's watch this new show on Netflix. It's supposed to be really good." So we started watching it, and I got into it because it was actually decent. Fast forward a few days and I'm scrolling through her texts on her phone. She'd left it on the couch while grabbing us snacks. And boom, there's Matt, talking to her about that exact show. She had started watching it because he recommended it to her. I know it might sound minor, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. Here we were doing something that felt like our thing, and I find out it's actually their thing. She didn't even tell me he'd suggested it. She just acted like it was all her idea. I felt stupid, honestly. Like, how did I miss this? So I scrolled up a bit more and saw that their messages weren't just catching up or friend stuff. She was sending him selfies, showing him outfits she'd wear to work, stuff like that. I didn't even know she took that many selfies, to be honest. Then there was this one message that really got to me. She'd sent him a picture of us carving pumpkins together. She captioned it, "Look at us being cute." I didn't even know she'd taken that picture, let alone shared it with him. That moment was supposed to be between us, right? But there she was, giving him a front row seat to our lives, our memories, like he was part of it. It felt like a betrayal, even if nothing big had happened. After that, it was all I could think about. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself that maybe I was overreacting, that I was just being paranoid. But then it got worse. She'd started texting him in the middle of the day, during work hours, nonstop. She'd even started setting her phone to do not disturb sometimes when she was with me, saying she didn't want interruptions. But I knew it was because she didn't want his notifications popping up. It was like she was hiding him, but in a way she thought was subtle enough to keep me from noticing. And then came the message that really messed me up. One night, she'd gone to bed early because she had a shift in the morning. I was sitting there alone, trying to relax but feeling uneasy, so I did the thing I never thought I'd do. I went through her phone, and there it was, a message from Matt that said, "It's in your court now." I stared at that line for way too long, not really understanding what it meant. But then it clicked. He was telling her that he had feelings for her, that he was waiting for her to make a move. My heart sank. And what did she reply? She didn't shut him down. She didn't tell him he was out of line. "Nope," she said. "Oh wow, that's a lot to take in. I need to figure out what I'm doing here." I swear my stomach did this sick flip when I read that. The worst part? She screenshotted that message and sent it to her best friend with a caption that said, "What do I even do?" Like she was actually considering it, actually thinking about whether she should go for him. I'm sitting there, holding her phone, and all I could think was, how did we even get here? Now, I want to be clear. I get that relationships can be messy, and that everyone can have a little what-if moment with someone from their past. But this was different. She was actively talking to him, sharing moments from our lives, and keeping him updated like he was some kind of backup plan. I kept thinking about all the little signs I'd ignored, all the weird comments she'd made, and how I'd brushed it off because I didn't want to be that guy. But maybe I should have been paying closer attention. The next morning, I couldn't even look at her. I was angry, hurt, confused all at once. She was acting all normal, getting ready for work, asking me if I wanted coffee, and I couldn't. It was like I was seeing her in a whole new light, and I didn't like what I was seeing. That whole day, I kept replaying those texts in my head, thinking about every little moment we'd shared recently and wondering how much of it was real. Had she been thinking about him all along? Was I just a placeholder? I didn't have answers, but I knew I needed to get to the bottom of it. By the time she got home, I was a wreck. I wasn't sure if I was ready to confront her, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending like everything was okay. I had to say something, to get it all out in the open, even if it meant things would get ugly. And that's how I found myself sitting there, waiting for her to walk through the door, rehearsing what I'd say, and wondering if this would be the end of everything we'd built together. Things really took a turn after a while, and let me tell you, it was nothing like I expected. I mean, I'd known my fiancée for 3 years. We'd been through all kinds of stuff together, and I thought we knew each other inside and out. But what I learned in the next few hours just flipped everything on its head. So, she gets home from work, acting like it's any other day. She's talking about how her shift went, just normal stuff, and I'm sitting there, not really listening because I'm just stewing over everything I saw on her phone. My head's spinning, and my heart's pounding, and I can't focus on a single thing she's saying. I think she could tell something was off because she eventually stopped mid-sentence and was like, "Hey, you okay?" I had to hold back because I didn't want to explode right then and there. I mean, part of me wanted to lay it all out, to show her exactly what I'd seen, but I was trying to keep it together. I didn't want to come across as some crazed guy flipping out over texts, so I just nodded and said, "We need to talk." You know, the classic line that nobody ever wants to hear. She looked a bit confused, maybe even nervous, but she sat down across from me on the couch. I could see her fidgeting with her hands, so I knew she sensed something was up. I took a deep breath and told her I'd seen her text with Matt, and she went pale. I'll never forget the look on her face when I mentioned his name. It was like she'd seen a ghost. At first, she tried to play it down. She said they were just friends, that it was nothing serious, just catching up. She went on about how they had a history, but that it didn't mean anything anymore. And look, maybe part of me wanted to believe her, but there was this gut feeling that she wasn't telling me the whole truth. So I pressed a bit, telling her that I'd seen how she'd shared parts of our life with him. The selfies, the picture of us carving pumpkins, all those little moments that were supposed to be between us. That's when she started getting defensive. She said she didn't understand why I was so upset, that it was just casual, and that she'd never actually done anything wrong. But the way she was talking, the way she kept looking down at her hands instead of at me, I knew she was hiding something. It was like she was dancing around the truth, giving me half answers and trying to make it seem like I was overreacting. I finally asked her about that message from him, the one where he told her, "It's in your court now." I asked her straight up what he meant by that, and her face changed again. She tried to brush it off, saying he was just being flirty and that she hadn't taken it seriously. But I knew that wasn't the whole story. I mean, why would she screenshot it and send it to her best friend if it didn't mean anything? She kept dodging, saying she didn't know what to do because she didn't want to lose our relationship, but that she also didn't want to cut him off completely. She kept saying, "It's complicated," like that was supposed to make me feel better. I was just sitting there thinking, how is this complicated? You either choose the guy you're engaged to or you don't. There shouldn't be any middle ground here. Then, she hit me with this line that just broke me. She said, "I didn't think you'd understand." That was her excuse for not telling me about him, for keeping everything under wraps. I didn't even know how to respond to that because, yeah, maybe I wouldn't have been thrilled to know she was reconnecting with some guy she used to have feelings for, but I would have listened. I would have tried to understand if she'd been honest with me from the start. But this wasn't honesty. This was hiding things, sneaking around and pretending everything was fine. And for what? To protect my feelings? No, it was to protect herself. To keep him in her life without facing any consequences. At that point, I didn't even know what I was trying to salvage. I felt like everything I thought we had was slipping through my fingers, like she'd already made her choice, and I was just the last one to figure it out. I asked her one more time, "Are you really telling me there's nothing more to this?" She hesitated for way too long before finally saying, "No, there's nothing more." But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still holding back. Her words didn't match her face, and her body language was all over the place. I've always been pretty good at reading people, and everything about her was screaming that she was hiding something else. But she'd made up her mind to stick to her story, to keep playing the "it's all innocent" card. So I told her that I needed some time to think. I didn't want to make a snap decision out of anger or hurt, and honestly, I felt like I'd been blindsided. I told her I was going to stay at my parents' place for a few days to clear my head. She didn't try to stop me, which I thought was strange. She didn't ask to come along, didn't even try to talk it out more. She just nodded, almost like she was relieved I was leaving. I packed a bag that night and left. As I drove to my parents' house, I kept going over everything in my head, wondering how I'd missed the signs, and if maybe I was partly to blame for not seeing things sooner. I mean, we'd been together for so long, and I thought we were in this together. But now I was questioning every memory, every moment we'd shared over the last few months. Had she been drifting away this whole time? And if she had, why didn't she just tell me? I spent that whole night lying awake, replaying every conversation, every glance, every little detail. I started thinking back to the small changes I'd ignored. The way she'd become more secretive with her phone, the way she'd started going out with friends more often, the way she'd suddenly gotten into new interests I didn't even know about. It was like she'd been building this separate life right in front of me, and I was too trusting to see it. And, maybe part of me was clinging to the hope that there was still something worth saving, that we could talk it out, go to counseling, do whatever it took to rebuild that trust. But as the hours went by, that hope started to fade. Because the more I thought about it, the more it felt like I was the only one holding on, the only one fighting for something that maybe wasn't even there anymore. The next day, I was exhausted, physically and mentally. I was supposed to go to work, but I ended up calling in sick because I just couldn't deal with anything. My mind was still stuck on her, on those texts, on that weird feeling that I hadn't even scratched the surface of what was really going on. By the end of that day, I knew I'd have to go back and confront her again. But this time, I wasn't going to let her dodge, wasn't going to let her hide behind excuses. I was going to get the truth, no matter what. Because if there was one thing I knew for sure, it was that I couldn't move forward with her until I knew everything. All right, so after spending a few days away at my parents' place, I knew I couldn't just let things sit like that. I was still spinning with everything I'd found out, still confused, and I was getting more and more frustrated by the minute. I had too many questions that needed answers, and I wasn't about to let her just keep dodging around the truth. When I got back to the apartment, she was there, acting like she was waiting for me. She looked all nervous, which, honestly, just confirmed my suspicions even more. She knew I wasn't coming back just to smooth things over. I sat down, and I could tell by her expression that she knew this wasn't going to be easy for her. I looked her straight in the eye and told her, "We need to talk again. And this time, I need the truth. All of it." She tried to start with the same spiel she'd given me last time, that nothing serious had happened, that they were just reconnecting as friends. But I wasn't buying it. I told her I wasn't looking for excuses or explanations this time. I wanted to know exactly what had gone on with Matt and why she'd let things get so far, even to the point where he felt like he could tell her his feelings were in her court. I could see her squirming, like she was searching for the right words, or maybe just the words that would make her look the least guilty. She kept looking down, avoiding eye contact, which was so unlike her. Usually she'd be up front, but now? She looked like a kid caught with her hand in the cookie jar. Finally, she took a deep breath and admitted that maybe she had let things go too far emotionally. She said she got caught up in the attention, that she didn't realize how much it would hurt me. But the way she was saying it, with that hesitation, I could tell there was more she wasn't telling me. So I pushed further, told her I needed her to tell me everything. No half-truths, no dodging. I wanted the whole picture. After a long pause, she said something that just made my heart drop. She admitted that she'd seen him in person a few times. Just for coffee, she claimed. And yeah, maybe if I was naive, I'd believe that. But something inside me knew that was just her way of testing the waters, seeing how much I'd actually tolerate. I asked her point blank, "Did anything physical happen?" She paused for a second, just a second too long, and then she nodded, barely looking at me. She mumbled something like, "It just kind of happened," like that was supposed to make it better. I sat there, feeling like the floor had just disappeared under me. She actually admitted it, as if it was no big deal, like it just happened, and wasn't a conscious choice on her part. The worst part was, she tried to downplay it, saying it was just a one-time thing, like that was supposed to make me feel better or something. But honestly, that only made it worse. Here I was, putting all my energy into trying to salvage something, trying to find even a sliver of honesty in this whole mess, and she'd gone behind my back, not just emotionally but physically too. I asked her, "Why? Why would you do this when we were supposed to be planning our future together?" Her answer? She said she'd been confused, that she felt like she'd lost a part of herself, and somehow reconnecting with Matt gave her back that peace. She went on about how she never meant to hurt me and didn't think it'd go this far. Hearing that made me feel like a complete idiot. All those little signs I'd brushed off, every time she'd been vague or avoided talking about him, it all clicked into place. I'd trusted her, and she'd taken advantage of that. While I'd been planning our life together, she'd been stepping out with someone else, letting him into parts of her life she should have kept for us. I tried to keep my composure, but I could feel myself getting more and more angry. I told her, I thought we were in this together, that we were building something real. She looked down, and I could tell she was feeling guilty, but at that point, her guilt didn't mean anything to me. She was only sorry because she got caught. If I hadn't found those messages, she would have kept it all a secret, hiding behind those fake smiles and I love yous. I asked her, "Do you even care about us anymore? Or was this all just a game to you?" She didn't really have an answer for that, just kept saying she was confused and made a mistake. But that wasn't a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to grab milk on the way home. This was a choice she made, fully aware of what it would do to us. Finally, I couldn't listen to any more of her excuses. I told her that if she wanted to be with him, then maybe she should just go. I wasn't going to sit around while she decided if I was worth it. She kept saying she wanted to fix things, that she'd do whatever it took to make it up to me. But honestly, I was done. I couldn't trust a single word coming out of her mouth. I got up and started packing a bag. I told her I needed some space to think, to get my head straight. She didn't try to stop me this time, just stood there, looking defeated. As I grabbed my stuff, I could see her watching me, like she wanted to say something, but didn't know how. But at that point, I didn't want to hear it. On my way out, she called after me, saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to get this far." I didn't even look back. Her apologies didn't mean anything anymore. I was done with all the lies, the secrets, and the half-baked excuses. I felt betrayed on a level I didn't even think was possible. I got in my car and just sat there for a while, processing everything. I could still hear her voice in my head, replaying her words over and over, and I just kept thinking, how did I not see this coming? All the red flags were there, but I chose to ignore them because I wanted to believe in us. I wanted to believe that we had something real, something worth fighting for. Driving away that night, I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. This was the person I'd built my life around, the person I thought I'd be with forever. And now it felt like all those years, all those memories, had been shattered in an instant. All right, so here's where things started getting real. After I left the apartment, I spent a couple more days at my parents' place, just trying to clear my head. I still couldn't believe that she'd actually crossed the line with him. Not just emotionally, but physically too. Everything we'd been building up over the past few years felt like it was crumbling around me, and I was stuck with all these questions about what was true and what was a lie. But then something hit me that just added to the mess. I started thinking about all the ways she'd been relying on me financially over the years. I mean, yeah, she worked part-time and chipped in here and there, but it was clear as day that I'd been the one making sure our life was comfortable. I'd helped her get a reliable car, one that was technically mine. I'd co-signed for our apartment because her credit wasn't great, and I'd covered most of our bills since day one. In a way, it felt like she'd been using me as a safety net while keeping this whole other side of her life going behind my back. And to add salt to the wound, it started to dawn on me just how deep her dependence on me went. She didn't have a lot of family support, and her friends were mostly mutual friends of ours, or ones who drifted away over the years. I'd been the one she leaned on for everything, and here she was, betraying me with some guy who probably couldn't even give her half of what I'd provided. When I decided to go back to the apartment to get some more of my stuff, she was there. I could tell right away she'd been waiting for me. She looked like she hadn't slept much, and for a second I thought, good. Maybe now she realizes what she's lost. But then I pushed that thought aside. I wasn't about to feel sorry for her. She'd done this to herself. As soon as I walked in, she went into apology mode. She said she'd been thinking about everything, and that she'd do whatever it took to fix things. She was saying all the right words, but I'd heard it all before, and now I knew those words meant nothing. She started talking about how much she missed me over the past few days, how she couldn't believe she'd let things get this bad. She kept saying she'd cut him off and that she wanted us to go to counseling, to work through this together. But all I could think about was how she'd acted before, how she'd pretended like everything was fine while lying to my face. And honestly, it was hard to believe she'd changed just because she got caught. I told her I wasn't buying her promises anymore, and that if she wanted to work on things, she should have thought about that before she started sneaking around. She kept looking at me with these pleading eyes, but I wasn't going to fall for it. I told her that I'd been the one putting everything into this relationship: time, money, commitment, while she'd been off keeping secrets. She tried to argue that she'd contributed too, but let's be real. Most of what she had was because of me. I'd been paying for most of our stuff, covering her when she couldn't afford things, and making sure she had what she needed. It hit me that I'd been supporting her this whole time, just for her to turn around and throw it all away for some guy who probably didn't care about her half as much as I did. Then she dropped a line that made my blood boil. She said, "I just got lost in the excitement of reconnecting with an old friend. I never thought it'd go this far." I couldn't believe she was still calling him an old friend after everything. I asked her, "How do you justify doing this to the person who's been there for you, who's been making sure you're all right this whole time?" She didn't have a good answer. She just looked away, her face turning red, like she was embarrassed. But I didn't care. At that point, I'd had enough. I told her that I was done, that I couldn't be with someone who'd put me in a position like this. She got really emotional, started crying and saying things like, "I know I messed up, but I can't imagine my life without you." She even tried to hug me, but I stepped back. I wasn't about to give her that comfort when she'd done nothing to deserve it. She started saying how hard things were going to be without me, how she didn't know where she'd go or what she'd do. It was like she was trying to guilt trip me into staying, hoping that I'd feel sorry for her and give her another chance. But all I could think about was how easy it had been for her to betray me, even after everything I'd done for her. If she'd really cared about us, about me, she would have respected our relationship enough to shut that whole old friend thing down right from the start. I told her, "You've been leaning on me this whole time, but you clearly didn't value what we had. You're just realizing it now because you're about to lose everything that made your life comfortable." And that's the truth of it. I'd been her support system, her rock, the person who made her life stable. And she threw that all away because she got caught up in excitement with some guy who wasn't even willing to commit to her. She kept saying she was sorry, that she'd learned her lesson, and that she'd prove herself if I just gave her the chance. But I couldn't trust her anymore. I told her I was taking my name off the lease and that she'd need to figure out her own place to stay. I could see her panic at that. She tried to argue, saying she couldn't afford the place on her own, that she didn't have anywhere else to go. And yeah, maybe that sounds harsh, but at that point, I didn't care. I wasn't responsible for her anymore. The more she talked, the more desperate she sounded, going on about how much she needed me, how she was going to be completely lost without me. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't fighting for me. She was fighting to keep her comfortable life, the one I'd built for her. It was never really about us or love. It was about what I provided, what she was afraid to lose now that she'd burned the bridge. By the end of it, I felt like a weight had been lifted. I wasn't responsible for her mess, and I wasn't going to let her make me feel like I was. I grabbed the rest of my stuff, and as I walked out the door, she was still calling after me, saying she'd change, that she'd prove herself. But I was done listening to promises that meant nothing. As I drove away, I felt a weird sense of relief. Like, yeah, this hurt and felt like betrayal on a level I hadn't known before. But at least now I knew the truth. At least now I could finally move forward, without wondering if she was hiding something or lying to my face. And that's where I left things, with her standing alone, realizing that she'd lost everything because of her own choices. I wasn't about to keep being her safety net. She'd made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. All right, here's how it all ended. After I left her in the apartment, I thought that was going to be the end of it. I was ready to cut my losses, move on, and start fresh. I'd packed my stuff, told her I was done, and as far as I was concerned, that chapter of my life was closed. I didn't expect to hear from her again, especially not after everything I'd said. But of course, she wasn't about to just let it go like that. A few days later, she started texting me, and at first I ignored it. I didn't see the point in dragging things out. I was done. I wanted no more of her explanations or excuses. But the messages kept coming. Long, drawn-out paragraphs talking about how much she missed me, how she'd made a huge mistake, and how she'd do whatever it took to make it right. Honestly, reading them just reminded me of how far she'd pushed things and how much damage had already been done. She must have realized I wasn't going to respond to texts, so she tried calling. I ignored that too. I'd already wasted too much time and energy on her drama, and I wasn't going to get sucked back in just because she was having regrets. But she kept trying, every day for a week. Finally, she left a voicemail saying she was outside my parents' house and just needed to talk. It felt like she was cornering me, and I knew if I didn't handle it, she was just going to keep showing up wherever I was. So I stepped outside to talk to her, and she looked rough, like she hadn't slept or eaten in days. She started off with the same routine I'd already seen in the messages and calls. She said she realized she'd messed up, that she'd take full responsibility, and that she was willing to do anything to prove herself to me. But I wasn't interested in her performance. I told her that she'd already proven who she was by her actions, and nothing she could say would change that. Then she dropped this line: "I have nowhere else to go." And for a second, I could feel the guilt trying to creep in. But I shut that down fast. I wasn't the one who'd betrayed her trust, who'd been sneaking around and lying for who knows how long. She'd made those choices, not me. I told her, "You should have thought about that before you did what you did." She started tearing up, saying that she didn't mean for any of this to happen, and that she never realized how much she needed me until now. But the thing is, all I could see was someone who was just scared of facing the consequences of her own actions. She wasn't sorry for betraying me. She was sorry she got caught and had to deal with the fallout. And that's not my problem. She kept pushing, saying she needed my support, that she couldn't handle all of this on her own. And then she asked if she could stay with me, just until she figured things out. I could tell she thought I'd cave, that I'd give in because we had all this history and because, well, I'd been her support for so long. But I told her, "No, you're on your own now. You wanted to keep secrets? Then go figure out your life without me in it." She kept pleading, saying she couldn't make it on her own, that she didn't have the resources, the stability. It was like she was throwing every excuse in the book to make me feel bad enough to take her back, but I wasn't about to be manipulated. I looked her in the eye and told her straight up, "You're only here because you realized how good you had it. If you really cared about me, you wouldn't have done any of this in the first place." At that point, she seemed to realize I wasn't budging. She started crying even harder, talking about how she had no idea what to do and that she made a mistake. But honestly, I was done feeling bad. She'd made her bed, and now it was time for her to deal with it. I didn't owe her anything. Not a place to stay, not my sympathy, nothing. Before she left, she tried one last time to tell me she'd do whatever it took to make it right, but I wasn't interested. I told her that if she really wanted to change, she should start by being honest with herself about who she is and why she does the things she does. Because all that talk about not meaning for it to happen was just her avoiding responsibility. She made her choices, and now she had to face them, alone. As I watched her walk away, I felt this sense of relief. Sure, there was still some hurt. Losing someone you thought you'd spend your life with isn't easy, no matter the circumstances. But letting go of that burden, of being her safety net and the one always taking care of her, felt like lifting a weight off my shoulders. I'd been carrying that relationship for so long, and it was time to put it down. A few days later, she sent one final text, a long paragraph trying to clear the air and asking if we could still be friends. That one really got me laughing. Friends? After all that? I didn't even bother responding. I just deleted the message and blocked her number. I wasn't about to let her keep a foot in the door, hoping she could come crawling back whenever things got tough. Looking back now, I realize how much I'd been ignoring all those red flags. She'd always been a bit dependent on me financially and emotionally, and I just chalked it up to her needing a little extra support. But it's clear now she was more interested in what I could give her than actually building a life together. It wasn't love. It was convenience. And to everyone who warned me that she wasn't marriage material, that I'd be setting myself up for heartbreak, thank you. You were right. I was blinded by what I thought we had, by the future I thought we were building together. But at the end of the day, I dodged a bullet, and I'm grateful for that. I can move on now, knowing that I didn't settle for someone who didn't deserve me. This whole experience was a lesson in trusting my gut, paying attention to red flags, and knowing when to walk away. She can figure out her own path now, just like I'm figuring out mine, and maybe one day she'll learn something from all this. But honestly, that's not my concern anymore. I've got my own life to live, and I'm finally free to live it without constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if I'm being lied to. So yeah, that's how it ended. She had nowhere to go, no plan, and no one else to turn to because she'd burned her bridges. And me, I'm done looking back. I'm ready to move forward and find someone who values me for real. Last update. Alright, here's how things played out after I cut her off for good. A couple of weeks went by, and honestly, I was finally starting to feel like I could breathe again. The constant stress was gone, and for the first time in months, I was able to focus on myself, work, and just moving forward. I hadn't heard from her since I blocked her, and that was fine by me. I was putting it all behind me, or at least trying to. Then one day, I was hanging out with a buddy of mine. His wife's close friends with a girl who knew my ex pretty well, so they ended up hearing some things. My friend looked hesitant at first, but eventually he said, "Man, you're gonna want to hear this." I could tell by the look on his face that it wasn't good, but at this point, I was kind of curious. Turns out, right after we broke up, my ex ran straight to Matt, the same guy she'd cheated with. They spent a week or two together, and for a second, I'll admit I felt that familiar sting. I mean, yeah, I was over her, but hearing she jumped right into something with the same guy she threw everything away for still hit. But that feeling didn't last long. Because here's the kicker. Matt wasn't exactly in it for the long haul. Apparently, he hooked up with her for a bit, but after about 2 weeks, he went right back to his own girlfriend. Just left my ex high and dry, like she was nothing more than a short fling. She'd thought she was running off to something exciting or whatever, and instead she got dumped and left alone, just like that. I'll be honest, finding this out was oddly satisfying. Not because I wanted her to be miserable or anything, but because it kind of felt like karma doing its thing. She threw away a 3-year relationship, lied to my face, and tried to get me back only after realizing what she was losing. And in the end, she got tossed aside by the very guy she thought was worth risking everything for. It's crazy to think about how quickly things came full circle. She lost everything she had with me for a fling that barely lasted 2 weeks. And now she's got nothing. No relationship, no stability, and nobody to fall back on. She made her choices, and they finally caught up to her.